The discharge papers from my gallbladder surgery were still warm in my hand when I saw them lined up like silent judges, 5 black garbage bags against the wrought iron gate. My son David stood nearby with his wife Ashley, both wearing expressions I had only ever seen them reserve for spoiled milk. "You're getting too old, so it's time for you to live somewhere else," Ashley announced in that sing-song voice she used at her boutique when talking to customers she secretly despised. I stood still, stunned that after 68 years of living, raising a son alone, and working endless shifts to put him through college, I had apparently become the garbage. Ashley waited for tears, begging maybe a dramatic collapse to give her the sense of victory she wanted. Instead, I smiled, loaded the bags into my Honda Civic, and drove away without another word. David called after me, but my glance froze him in place. 3 hours later, I sat in a furnished studio apartment sorting through the contents of my life reduced to trash bags. Among old sweaters, I found something I had forgotten, a business card from Eleanor Richardson, a woman I had met while volunteering at the hospital gift shop. Eleanor had started her first company at 72 and become a millionaire by 75. The thought made me laugh through the sting of betrayal. Maybe being discarded wasn't the end, it could be the beginning. 3 days later, I sat in Eleanor's office as she poured tea from China that probably cost more than David's rent. She listened as I told her everything: the eviction, the cruelty, the humiliation. Her eyes sharpened as I finished. "How much do you have saved?" she asked. "About $30,000, I admitted, and the house is paid off, though David's been living there rent-free." Eleanor leaned forward with the precision of a general. "Here's what we're going to do. You're going to stop feeling sorry for yourself. You're going to get angry. And you're going to let me teach you how to turn that anger into cold, hard cash." She slid a leather portfolio across her desk. Inside were photographs of a run-down strip mall. "Food service," she explained. "But not just any food service. Comfort food. Real comfort food people will pay good money for when they're tired or too busy to cook." She wanted me to partner with her. She would provide the capital and guidance, I would provide the sweat and expertise. Profits would be split 60-40 in my favor once she recouped her investment. One condition: the restaurant would be built directly across from Ashley's boutique. I couldn't help but laugh at the poetic symmetry. The next morning, I went back to my old house to collect the mail they hadn't bothered to forward. David's Tesla was gone, but Ashley's white Range Rover gleamed in the driveway. I still had my key, so I stepped inside. The house smelled different. Some expensive candle Ashley favored that reeked of fake vanilla. On the counter was a pile of bills and one envelope that made my pulse quicken: the property tax assessment. I tore it open. My name was still on the deed. The house I bought for $60,000 30 years ago was now valued at over $400,000. Ashley appeared at the top of the stairs in yoga pants, her face paling as she saw the envelope in my hand. "What are you doing here?" she snapped. "Collecting my mail," I said sweetly. Imagine my surprise to discover I'm still responsible for taxes on a house I apparently don't live in anymore. She stammered something about David handling paperwork, but I cut her off. "Since my name is still on the deed, I'll be making a few changes." I pulled out my phone and took photos of their belongings, their modifications to my home, their presumption of ownership. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Documentation," I replied, "for my lawyer." And with that, I walked out, leaving her standing frozen on the stairs. The next day, Eleanor introduced me to Marcus Webb, the silver-haired owner of the strip mall. He extended his hand, smiling with the kind of confidence money and experience give. "Miss Camden, Eleanor tells me you're going to be our new anchor tenant." His eyes lingered on me as if I were more than just another business partner. He asked what experience I had in restaurants. 30 years serving truckers at 3 a.m., I replied. "If I can keep them happy with a hot meal, suburban families should be easy." He laughed a real laugh and nodded. I like her, he told Eleanor. She's got grit. For the first time since being thrown out, I felt not like discarded trash, but like someone building something worth keeping. Construction began on a Tuesday, and I made sure to be there every morning at 7:00 a.m., coffee in hand, standing across from Ashley's boutique. She had a perfect view of my resurrection as contractors gutted the space and rebuilt it into something alive with purpose. Marcus stopped by most days, always with a convenient excuse, checking the electrical, reviewing lease terms, but usually bringing lunch. One day, he handed me the world's best turkey club and said simply, "I don't have to. I want to." His presence was steady grounding, and I found myself talking about Bill, my late husband, with an openness I hadn't felt in years. Marcus shared that his wife had left him for his business partner, taking half his fortune with her. "Sometimes you have to lose everything to figure out what you actually want," he said. The real blow came when Eleanor's investigator discovered David had been using my house as collateral for loans, forging my signature for nearly $200,000. I sat in a law office with Eleanor and Patricia Hammond, a lawyer who specialized in asset protection, as she laid out the facts. "Clear fraud," Patricia said. "If this collapses, creditors will come after your property." Eleanor leaned forward with her shark's smile. "Or you could sell me the house. Full market value cash in 45 days. We'll clear the debts and give you capital to fund the restaurant." Patricia added that Marcus had offered me his carriage house as part of a property management arrangement. It was a ruthless, elegant solution. David would lose the house he had claimed as his own, and I would gain the freedom to build something new. I returned to the house once more to gather paperwork. Ashley confronted me at the top of the stairs, suddenly nervous. "Helen, I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said, her voice sugar-sweet but trembling underneath. I looked her dead in the eye. "You mean it's inconvenient that David didn't want me around while he burned through my money?" Her composure cracked, but she had no defense. Before leaving, I took photos of their things, their renovations, their assumption of ownership. "What are you doing?" she asked again. "Documentation," I replied, and shut the door behind me. That night, I signed the first set of sale papers with Patricia. For the first time in months, I slept deeply. Within weeks, Marcus's carriage house became my home. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, gardens outside the windows, luxury compared to the cramped studio where I'd unpacked my life from garbage bags. Marcus helped me carry boxes, insisting it was no trouble. "No catch," he said when I asked why he was offering so much. "Just company. Gets quiet here sometimes." Something warm and unfamiliar settled in my chest. 16 weeks later, on a crisp October morning, the restaurant opened under a name Eleanor insisted on second chances. She had invited half the town. Marcus had rallied the local business owners, and I had timed the opening so Ashley would be forced to watch from across the street. The first customer, a retired principal, declared the meatloaf better than her grandmother's. By noon, we had a line out the door. Even Charlotte Stevens, a food critic from the city paper, sat quietly at a corner table photographing her salmon salad. Through the window, Ashley stood in her boutique doorway, watching a crowd pour into my restaurant, while her store sat empty. During the rush, Marcus rolled up his sleeves and tied on an apron. "Behind you, gorgeous," he whispered as he passed me plates, and I felt myself blush like a teenager. We worked side by side until the crowd thinned. By evening, Eleanor was practically vibrating with joy. "Do you realize who that woman in the red coat was?" she whispered. "Charlotte Stevens. If she writes a good review, you're untouchable." I looked across the street again. Ashley's boutique looked like a hollow shell. For once, the scoreboard favored me. That night, as I closed the register and tallied the day's receipts, the phone rang. Unknown number. "Second chances." "This is Helen," I answered. Silence, then a small, defeated voice. "Mom, it's David. I saw the restaurant online. It looks really nice." He hesitated. I also got served with papers about the fraud. Patricia Hammond is representing you, isn't she? She is, I said evenly. A long silence. Then I'm sorry. I never meant for it to get this bad. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. You didn't mean for it to get bad, David. You meant for it to stay hidden. He didn't argue. Finally, he said, Ashley left me this morning. She said she couldn't be married to someone facing charges. She took everything. I could almost hear the hollow echo of his empty house. For a moment, pity tugged at me. But then I remembered the garbage bags, the forged documents, the dismissal in his wife's voice. Actions have consequences, I said softly, and hung up. The restaurant thrived almost immediately. The critics' review appeared a week later, awarding 5 stars and praising Second Chances as comfort food, elevated to art served by people who understand that hospitality is about more than just food. Eleanor framed the article and hung it by the entrance. Marcus brought champagne, and the phone rang all day with reservations. I should have been celebrating, but instead, I stood in my kitchen staring at a letter forwarded from my old address. It was from David's criminal attorney requesting a meeting to discuss potential resolution options that might benefit all parties. Translation: they wanted me to make a deal. Marcus found me holding the letter and frowned. You're not considering this, are you? I didn't answer right away. He's still my son, I said finally. Yes, he betrayed me, but he's still my son. Marcus's voice was firm but gentle. Helen, if you let this go, what stops him from doing it again? Maybe not to you, but to someone else. People who forge signatures for $200,000 rarely start with their own mothers. The thought chilled me more than anger ever had. A few days later, I sat across from David's lawyer, a smooth man in an expensive suit who spoke as if felony fraud were a parking ticket. Your son is prepared to plead guilty to a misdemeanor, he said, with full restitution over 5 years and 3 years probation, if you'll agree to drop the more serious charges. He smiled as if offering me a gift. I asked where David was. The lawyer said it would be more productive to keep the negotiations professional. Of course. Even facing prison, David couldn't face me directly. I told him I'd consider it, though deep down, I already knew my answer. That Friday, Patricia arranged a conference call. Ms. Camden, the lawyer, began smoothly. Have you had a chance to consider our proposal? I have, I replied. And the answer is no? He sounded stunned. Perhaps you didn't hear me. I heard you. My son will face the full consequences of his actions. This isn't an emotional decision. It's a business one. David stole from me. But more importantly, he taught me the cost of silence. If I let this go, I'd be complicit. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then we'll see you in court, the lawyer finally said. Indeed you will. Not long after, David called me directly. His voice was cracked, desperate. Mom, please. 5 years in prison. Don't do this to me. My heart clenched, but I forced myself to stay firm. I'm not doing anything to you, David. You did this to yourself. It was one mistake, he cried. $200,000 in forged documents isn't one mistake, I said. It's 200,000 decisions to steal from your own mother. He wept, begging, insisting he never meant to hurt me. What would you do if someone stole that much from your children? I asked. He faltered. That's different. No, I said softly. It isn't. I told him I loved him, but I would not enable him to hurt anyone else. Then I hung up, turned off my phone, and went to work. 6 months later, the trial began. David pleaded not guilty, apparently hoping a jury would see him as a misguided son instead of a criminal. The defense painted me as a vindictive old woman punishing her child. Classic victim blaming. I sat in the front row each day, Eleanor beside me, Marcus just behind. The prosecution presented the evidence: forged signatures on loan documents, my son's recorded confession. the trail of financial abuse that had escalated over 2 years. The turning point came when Ashley took the stand. Dressed immaculately, she swore to tell the truth and then calmly exposed David. He said his mother was sitting on a gold mine and was too old to enjoy it, she testified. He said he was just accelerating the inevitable since she was going to leave him everything anyway. Her words hit me like a blow to the chest. My son hadn't just stolen from me, he had planned it, justified it, convinced himself it was his right. Eleanor squeezed my hand so hard it left marks. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding David guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 7 years with parole possible after 5. As they led him away in handcuffs, David looked back at me one last time. His eyes weren't filled with anger, but something closer to understanding. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said quietly. "I know you are," I replied, my voice breaking despite myself. "I'm sorry too." And then he was gone. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed with questions about elder abuse and betrayal. I ignored them all, walking steadily between Eleanor and Marcus as if they were bodyguards. In the car, Eleanor asked, "How do you feel?" I thought about it seriously. Sad? Yes. Relieved? Absolutely. But more than anything, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. "Free," I said finally. "I feel free." Life settled into a new rhythm. The restaurant grew stronger with each passing month, the critics' review drawing curious crowds and loyal regulars alike. Marcus came by almost daily, sometimes to help with property management issues, sometimes just to keep me company. Our conversations deepened until one night, sitting on his porch beneath the stars, he asked quietly, "Do you regret it?" I knew he meant David. "No," I said truthfully. "I regret that he made the choices he did, but not that I stood up for myself." He reached for my hand, his touch steady. "For what it's worth, I think you're the strongest person I've ever met." I laughed softly. 6 months ago, I was living out of garbage bags. That didn't feel very strong. Marcus shook his head. 6 months ago, you were grieving and trusting. That isn't weakness. Strength is what you did once you realized you couldn't count on their love." His words lingered with me long after I left his porch. Weeks later, Marcus surprised me with a small velvet box. He opened it slowly, his dark eyes searching mine. Inside was a diamond ring, simple and perfect. "I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow," he said. "I just don't want to waste what time we have left being careful. I want to build whatever comes next with you." Tears sprang to my eyes before I could stop them. 8 months earlier, I had been discarded like garbage. Now I was a business owner, a woman with her own home being asked to consider a future with someone who believed in me. "Yes," I whispered through my tears. "Yes, I would very much like that." Running Second Chances became more than a business, it was a lifeline. Families came for Sunday dinners, young couples stopped in after work, retirees gathered for coffee and pie. They didn't just eat my food, they shared pieces of their lives. I had built more than a restaurant. I had built a community. Even Eleanor admitted one afternoon watching the tables fill, "You've created something remarkable, Helen. This isn't just profit. This is belonging." David, meanwhile, became a ghost on the edge of my thoughts. Letters arrived from prison, some pleading, some bitter, some simply recounting the monotony of his days. I read a few, then stopped. Love didn't disappear, but trust had been shattered. I had to protect the life I was building, not reopen the wound he had left. Sometimes guilt crept in at night, whispering that I had abandoned him the way he had abandoned me. But then I would remember the garbage bags on the curb, the forged documents, the way he had looked at me, as if my existence were an inconvenience. He had discarded me long before I chose to hold him accountable. Ashley vanished from our lives almost completely. I heard rumors she had moved back with her mother, trying to reinvent herself as a social media influencer. Her boutique across the street sat empty, the for lease sign in the window, a daily reminder that greed and cruelty rarely build anything lasting. Customers sometimes asked about her with a wink as if they knew the story. I just smiled and said, "People come and go, but comfort food is forever." Through it all, Marcus remained by my side. He helped me balance books, fix leaky faucets in his rental properties, and taste test new recipes. He had a way of making even the smallest tasks feel like shared adventures. On quiet evenings, we walked through his gardens, hands brushing the silence between us full of promise. For the first time in decades, I felt cherished, not as someone's burden, but as a partner, an equal. Eleanor, ever the strategist, continued to guide me. "You've got momentum," she said one morning. "Now's the time to think about expanding." I laughed at the thought. "I'm 68, Eleanor. How much expanding do you think I can handle?" Her eyes glinted. "Helen, you're proof that age means nothing. You've already reinvented yourself once. Why stop now?" I wasn't sure I had her appetite for empires, but part of me wondered if she was right. The truth was simple. My life had been broken down to garbage bags, but I had rebuilt it piece by piece. And standing in my bustling restaurant, with Marcus smiling at me from the doorway, and Eleanor raising a toast to second chances, I knew one thing with certainty: I was no longer disposable. The months that followed were the most fulfilling of my life. Second Chances wasn't just a restaurant. It was proof that discarded people could rise again. Each day brought familiar faces who became regulars. Each meal was a reminder that what I had built mattered. Marcus often teased me that my meatloaf had a waiting list, and Eleanor, ever pragmatic, began hinting about franchises. For the first time in years, the future didn't scare me, it inspired me. David's trial had ended with a clear verdict, but its echoes lingered. He wrote me letters from prison, alternating between contrition and defensiveness. Sometimes he begged for forgiveness, other times he blamed Stress Ashley, or anyone but himself. I stopped reading after a while. I had forgiven him in my heart, but forgiveness didn't mean allowing him to escape accountability. Love had to coexist with boundaries, something I had only learned far too late. Ashley disappeared entirely from our orbit. The boutique was shuttered, its windows dark, the for-lease sign gathering dust. Customers sometimes whispered when they looked across the street, asking if I felt vindicated. I never answered with gloating. I didn't need to. Success was its own kind of quiet revenge. Watching families crowd my restaurant while her empire crumbled was satisfaction enough. Marcus and I grew closer with each passing week. He had a steadiness that soothed the parts of me still bruised from betrayal. He was patient when I was doubtful, encouraging when I underestimated myself, and charming enough to make me laugh even on the most stressful days. On evenings when the restaurant closed, we would sit together in his garden sipping wine and talking about everything from childhood memories to wild dreams of the future. Sometimes he reached for my hand in silence, and that was enough. One evening, Eleanor joined us on Marcus's porch. She raised her glass to me. "Helen," she said, her voice rich with admiration, "you are living proof that no one is ever too old to start over. You've turned betrayal into triumph and despair into possibility. That's rarer than money. That's legacy." I smiled, humbled, realizing she was right. What I had built wasn't just about business, it was about proving that age, pain, or betrayal didn't define the end of a story. They could define the beginning of a new one. When I thought back to the day I carried my life in garbage bags to a cramped studio, I almost didn't recognize that woman. She had been lost, broken, convinced that her worth had an expiration date. Now I stood in a restaurant filled with laughter, with a community that embraced me, with a man who wanted to build a future by my side. All of it had grown out of the moment I refused to crumble. The night Marcus slid the ring onto my finger, I realized what second chances really meant. It wasn't just the name of a restaurant, it was the story of my life. I had been discarded, but I had chosen not to stay discarded. I had chosen to stand, to fight, to rebuild. And in doing so, I found love, friendship, purpose, and peace. There were still hard days, of course. Sometimes I woke in the middle of the night, haunted by David's words, his plea for me not to let him go to prison. Sometimes guilt twisted in me like a knife. But then I would remember Ashley's cold dismissal, the forged signatures, the way David had seen me as nothing more than a resource to be drained. Those memories steadied me. Justice wasn't cruelty. It was protection both for me and for anyone else he might have hurt. As the seasons turned, second chances became a fixture in town. People told me their stories over coffee, stories of heartbreak, recovery, survival. They saw themselves in me, and I saw pieces of myself in them. It turned out that starting over at 68 wasn't just possible, it was powerful. The greatest lesson I carried from it all was simple: being discarded is not the end. Sometimes it's the beginning of freedom, the push we need to reclaim ourselves. Betrayal can break us, yes, but it can also forge us into something stronger than we ever imagined. Life rarely unfolds the way we expect, but if we're brave enough to step forward even when carrying nothing but garbage bags, we can build something extraordinary from the wreckage. So if you've listened this far, remember, no matter your age, your past, or your pain, you are never truly out of chances. There is always a way to begin again. If my story resonates with you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need hope, subscribe for more stories of resilience, and comment below with your own experience. Your voice matters, and someone out there might find their second chance because of it.